What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. Not really recapping yesterday's game because, well, what is there to recap? I mean, the New York Giants lost in embarrassing fashion once again. Shocker. I'm not saying anything that nobody doesn't know. I'm not saying anything that we didn't all expect. We knew that the New York Giants were going to lose to the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson with 5 touchdowns. They looked like a well-oiled machine. They're one of the best teams in the AFC, and we are the worst team in the NFL. We knew all of that going in. Nothing changed coming out. The only thing that there really is to react to, well, Malik Neighbors played really well in that game, and a plane flew overhead prior to the game, once again calling for John Mara to fire everybody. So there is still stuff to discuss, and this is a Giants team that is just spiraling out of control at the end of the day. I'll say Neighbors, I got to give him credit for putting his head down and just continuing to work, continuing to make plays. He's been playing through injuries as well, and I think that says a lot about him. We've heard, Alex, here and there's been fans who have been like, oh, he's a diva, he calls for the ball too much, he needs to fix his drops problems. He's gotten criticism throughout the season. Hasn't seemed to affect him at all, hasn't bothered him one bit. He's just continued to go out there, do his thing, be himself, and make plays for the New York Football Giants, and I do appreciate that, and I think that the Giants really do have a true superstar in the making with Malik Neighbors. Now, the only caveat to that is, will he ever reach his potential without a legitimate starting quarterback throwing him the ball? And obviously we want to go ahead and discuss that, the potential of Neighbors with a legitimate starting quarterback throwing him the ball week in and week out, because the Giants have had 4 quarterbacks under center this season. It took Tim Boyle getting in there for somebody to finally throw Malik Neighbors his first touchdown since week 3. I don't know how we went that long without a Malik Neighbors touchdown, but hey, at least we got one yesterday. It was exciting to see, and ultimately, at the end of the day, Neighbors looking like a true star. We've got Tyrone Tracy looking good. There are some young, bright pieces here, but can they get that one ultimate piece to tie it all together in the quarterback position? Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? I don't know if you have any thoughts on yesterday's bloodbath of a game, because that's what it was, but I know that Malik Neighbors caught your eye, caught everybody's eye. The touchdown grab was great. He made some nice plays. How are you feeling about him and the potential of this Giants team to hopefully turn things around in the future, led by a QB developing a nice relationship with Malik Neighbors?
I mean, listen, yesterday's game, I don't really want to harp on it. We all knew the outcome of that game. It was going to be an absolute disaster fest, and it was. Planes flying overhead, and, we all know where the Giants are headed, and I think at this point it's safe to say there's a pretty good chance they clean house once again. But the leftover pieces, this is what a new GM, a new head coach, if that's the direction they go, they're going to have to pick things up, and they're going to have to build off of what we already have. And at the very least, you have a WR1, a superstar in Malik Neighbors who has the upside of being a true dominant player in the NFL. I mean, the fact is pretty simple, man. He missed a little bit of time this year. Obviously he missed week 11. But he's been kind of limited the last couple weeks. He has been dealing with groin injury and other issues, and this is a player that's fighting through injury, and I can respect that, man. 21 years old, he hasn't really said anything that crazy. I mean, despite the fact the Giants are literally a league embarrassment, he's been pretty steadfast in being a good teammate and not saying anything that would get him in too much trouble. I know there was some quotes that people kind of take out of context and focus in on, but for the most part, I don't think he's said anything out of line. Just kind of maybe pinpointing what we already know. The Giants are bad at quarterback, and they need to do more on offense and get him the ball earlier in games. And that falls on Brian Dable's shoulders, falls on the quarterback's shoulders, and he has no control over these things. He's open. But I'll tell you this: I mean, there are some places that he needs to clean up. Obviously, the drops in critical moments is something that he will probably improve upon. This is a guy playing with, look, he's a confident dude, but how can you be confident playing on this team? They're giving him stupendous amount of volume. We're talking about a guy that has 135 targets and a 90 receptions this year, 66.7% reception rate, 901 yards, and 4 touchdowns. What are you going to do? He had 10 receptions yesterday against Baltimore. They don't even look in the direction of Darius Slayton. They barely look in the direction of anybody else. Jalen Hyatt runs cardio every time he's on the field. Neighbors is the guy. He is the only receiver they actually get the ball to and scheme the ball open. You look at other teams, Anthony, and, let's use, the Rams as an example, because you see how they spread the ball around. They design plays for Cooper Kupp. They design plays for Puka Nacua. They design plays for all of their receivers, even the tight ends they have. So, the Giants, they design plays for Malik Neighbors and sometimes Wan'Dale Robinson, but most of the time they don't really design plays for other guys. I mean, they're running routes individually, and sometimes it doesn't look like they're playing as a team. You know, it's a very individualistic offense. In this instance, in my opinion, there's not much balance to it. I know Tyrone Tracy gets involved in the run game, at times, and he's dropped a lot of passes this year. I think that's a place where he really needs to improve. But I would love to see getting a young quarterback, building a balanced system. Of course, you're going to lean on your top playmakers. Like objectively, that's just how the NFL goes. Neighbors is going to get a lot of targets, but I mean, you said it best a couple weeks ago, Anthony. It's unsustainable amount of volume. He's going to get hurt with this amount of volume in another season. They need another receiver they can trust. They need a guy who's going to hold on to the football. Wandale has his problem with drops. Slayton certainly has his problem with drops. Do you think it's a really important factor, not just to get the quarterback, but another receiver they can depend on to take a little bit of stress off of Neighbor's shoulders?
Yes, I think that finding a second playmaker to throw into the receiving game should be an absolute top priority for the New York Giants. Now, they have a lot of top priorities. They have a lot of needs to address. Quarterback paramount. They have to address the offensive line again, defensive line, cornerback, safety. Like, they have a lot of work to do this offseason, but if we're talking about creating an environment that allows a rookie quarterback to potentially thrive and find immediate success, you're talking about an environment that has numerous playmakers around that quarterback. Even if you're looking at Jaden Daniels, he didn't just step in and transform bad receivers, take water and turn it into wine. That's not what Jaden Daniels did. He stepped in and they already had Terry McLaurin. He is a true number one wide receiver. They already had somebody, which is why it is exciting that the Giants. Listen, should they have taken a quarterback in April? Probably. Do we wish that they had a quarterback on their roster right now that we had hope for the future in? Absolutely. They don't, but at least they have a playmaker who, when that rookie quarterback steps in, can target, force feed the rock, and find some success with, and that's Malik Neighbors. He could be the Terry McLaurin in this scenario, how Terry McLaurin has been for Jaden Daniels. I mean, listen, you look around the NFL, Alex, and that's the strategy. You don't just bring in the rookie quarterback. You bring in pieces to put around the rookie quarterback, then you plug that quarterback in. Even Chicago. Now, obviously, some weeks Caleb Williams has been better than others. He's a rookie. He's having his growing pains. But they did everything they could. They brought in DeAndre Swift. They brought in DJ Moore a couple years ago and then extended him this offseason. They brought in Keenan Allen. They put playmakers around him to try and make life as easy as possible. Not to mention, they even added another top 10 pick with Rome Odunze at wide receiver. That's the strategy that you need to employ or deploy when you're taking a rookie quarterback. Surround him with as much talent as possible. It does so much for your offense. It opens things up because it creates more one-on-one opportunities for your other playmakers. Neighbors is constantly doubled. Still gets the ball. Still is a beast. But could you imagine if they had another receiver that was worthy of double teaming and the Giants were able to attack defenses with two solid quality playmakers? We've been talking about that for ever now, about how we want the Giants to have multiple playmakers, take pressure off of one. When we had Saquon, we wanted to add a wide receiver to take pressure off of Saquon, and so that Saquon could open things up in the receiving game for a receiver. It's just never come to fruition, but now, with the New York Giants being in the position that they're in, likely having the number one overall pick, taking a quarterback, you have to bring in that QB and you have to bring in some true premier receiving talent around him in order for him to find success, especially if we're discussing this, Alex, under the guise of Joe Schoen returning next year. Because if Joe Schoen is back next year and he does draft his quarterback, the Giants are going to have to win games next year. You can't have another 2-win season and keep your job. So what are the Giants going to do? They're going to bring in a rookie quarterback, and they're also going to have to find a legitimate playmaker to pair with him. Now, obviously, Neighbors is a legitimate playmaker, and I can't wait to see him develop a chemistry and a connection with a young quarterback growing in the league. But it can't just be Malik Neighbors. It can't just be Tyrone Tracy as he enters his second season. You got to add legitimate stars around a rookie quarterback so they can continue to grow, develop, and get up to speed with the NFL. Now, who would that rookie quarterback be, Alex? Could be Cam Ward. Could be Shedeur Sanders. Could be somebody else that we're not necessarily seeing right now, and maybe they come up during the draft process as a real riser towards April. But right now, what's paramount for the Giants? Make sure that this is a situation that you feel comfortable dropping a rookie quarterback into. You don't want to just drop him in to a mess like the Carolina Panthers did with Bryce Young, like the Giants did with Daniel Jones in 2019. Make sure whichever quarterback you take has an actual arsenal of weaponry around him so that he can not only have success in the immediate, but also in the long term.
I mean, that's a great point. And listen, if you look at the offense objectively right now, Anthony, I mean, let's see the pieces that we do have, right? I mean, I love Jermaine Luminor. He's been a great player for us at such a cost-efficient price tag. I mean, Greg Van Roten's been fine, but, you need a better starter at right guard. I mean, he's competent. He holds down the fort. JMS, we need to see more growth from him. It is really disappointing. You know what I mean? Like the Giants' investment in players through the draft has been really disappointing in terms of the actual return. We can't see this rookie class go to waste. We can't see the usual Giants process of good first years, really bad everything else. Like this is the regression part of the Giants, like where they have a good first year, promising, optimistic, and then they take a massive step in the wrong direction. Perfect example being Deontay Banks. Like we've seen this over and over again with the Giants. Great starts, bad finishes. You could say the same thing about the team. Now, the thing about Joe Shane and Brian Dable at this point in time, it's like if they perform poorly, let's say they draft their quarterback and they perform poorly next year, they're probably getting fired. Like, I don't think the Giants are going to give them some extended leash. I think it's kind of an overblown conclusion that, if you let them pick the quarterback, you have to keep them for another 2 or 3 years. I don't think that's true because other teams do not subscribe to that mentality. We just watched the Patriots draft Drake May, and they're about to fire Gerard Mayo. Like, they may. I'm not going to say they're probably going to. I say they may fire Gerard Mayo.
They fired Matt.
The Bears are about to do it. Mm-hmm. Right. They fire Matt LaFleur. Eberflus could be on the way out too.
Eberflus is who they fired.
So right. So Eberflus is gone. They're turning the chapter. I mean, Ryan Poles is a pretty decent GM. I think that roster is pretty good. The coaching is the problem. But I do think that the Giants, on the other hand, Shane has not drafted a good team or composed a good team, and Brian Dable has failed to crack even 15 points per game this season. So you're looking at multiple failures at every level of the organization. I personally, at this point, think you let a new regime come in, you let them draft their quarterback, and then you allow them to have that leash of building around that rookie quarterback. At this point, it's already done. The signature has been signed. They are already on the hook for this disaster. And the players, I mean, God, you were just telling me before the episode, Isaiah Simmons is out here saying they get a new quarterback. I'm like, brother, we have players on our current team talking about the draft. Like that, when does that ever happen?
Crazy. I feel and maybe Giants fans, I want to bring this up. Maybe somebody needs to jog my memory, but we've been doing this show for 5 years now. I can't remember ever having players openly talking about draft prospects midway through the season. The season's not over. It's not like they're being asked this in March or, they're being asked in December, what are your thoughts on this quarterback that you guys might draft in April? I've never seen that. That's wild. Crazy to me that these guys are talking about, well, maybe Shedeur Sanders could step in here and transform the franchise. Dude, you are playing a game next Sunday, and you're talking about April? Isaiah Simmons isn't even under contract next year, and he's talking about this franchise getting transformed. I feel like I've never seen that. Couple that with the quote that we discussed on the channel last week, Alex, where Jalen Hyatt was saying, yeah, it's been a tough year. We'll figure it out next year. These guys still have games to play. There are games left on the schedule. I understand that this season is a wash. The Giants are not making the playoffs. They've already been eliminated. First team to do so. But why are these players talking about March, talking about April, talking about next fucking September? What the fuck is happening? I've never seen anything like this. I don't know if that indicates that this is a real tank job, like the Giants are legitimately just punting on the year. Maybe they are losing. Maybe they're looking ahead. I don't think the NFL teams really do that. But fuck, these guys are definitely not trying their hardest to win if they're thinking about April already.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a point where I think that they understand what the Giants brass has done. They pigeonholed themselves into this situation. You got Tim Boyle playing games. And by the way, Tim Boyle looked probably more competent than DeVito or Drew Lock in the small sample we saw. It's kind of crazy. Obviously, the Ravens took out most of their starters by that point. So, it's neither here nor there. I think a couple lucky throws. They hadn't seen Tim Boyle, the next savior of the Giants. So, I really do think at this point in time, if you are the Giants and trying to rebuild, you look at your offense and say this, all right, what do we have? What do we have on offense? We have a injury-prone left tackle, and I think it's fair to say Andrew Thomas is injury-prone because he has never gone a full season without getting hurt. And I don't think that we can sit here and act like he's going to be a consistent player anymore. That is a problem now. Jermaine Illuminor, like him on the offensive line, JMS needs to see massive improvement. It's embarrassing how little development he's seen. John Runnion's a fine player. Greg Van Roten's a fine player. The Giants need to prioritize finding a competent swing tackle that is priority number one of 100,000 things they need to do. Obviously, there's other priorities, 1A, 1B, 1C. The list goes on. But finding a competent swing tackle must be done. It must be done. It's no longer time to, freaking fiddle around with draft picks who are not proving their worth and not developing. You got to cut some of these guys. Josh Ezeudu, I'm cutting Josh Ezeudu. Like, he's literally just taking up a roster spot for nothing. He's horrible. And I it's not that I don't like these guys, and I feel bad for them because they've been put in bad positions, a lot of them bad developmental spots, but they are just not NFL talent. Just straight up not NFL caliber talent. Evan Neal, if they don't transition him to guard, they should cut his ass too. You know what I mean? Or at least try to trade him for freaking pennies on the dollar.
I actually have to mention, I feel like Evan Neal's been kind of decent the past few weeks. Like, he definitely hasn't been an eyesore. He hasn't been bad, and I think that's important to note, just the fact that he's been serviceable, because he's been, in the past, the worst in the league. He's been somewhat serviceable in recent weeks, and I do want to give him a little bit of credit for that. That's all.
Against Baltimore, he gave up one pressure, so he played 68 snaps. He was better, so I'll give him credit for that. As you said, credit where it's due. I'll give him credit for that. He was okay against New Orleans. Dallas, 5 pressures and a sack. He was really bad in that game. So he's looked better, more competent. So, we'll see what happens, but this Giants team is running the ball. They can't do much. A lot of these sacks are quarterback. Teams are not even trying really against this team. They're punting knowing their offense isn't going to move the ball. The Ravens had at the 50-yard line 4th and 1 and punted. They know the Giants aren't going to move the football. So it's it's bad, but I'm not saying that that's not a hit on Evan Neal. I think he has been better. But I want to see it against in a competitive environment. This is not a competitive environment for the Giants. You know what I mean? They're not a competitive team, but maybe he is just playing better and doing more. So, we'll continue to monitor Evan Neal, but I don't see him as this critical piece on offense right now. Obviously, he has to prove a lot. So more so what I'm trying to get at is what do we have on offense to build around? Neighbors. I don't trust Andrew Thomas. The offensive line is still patchwork. We still need help there. Wandale drops a lot of passes, but I still like him. I think on a better team, he'd be better, but I'm not going to sit here and act like you're building an offense around him. Tyrone Tracy has a lot of promise. I do like him a lot, but he needs to clean up his drops as well. The dude drops past every game. I think Darius Slayton's gone. Jalen Hyatt's basically a freaking cardio. Might as well run track. I think this offense has very, very little talent to build around, right? Neighbors is the guy. But to maximize Neighbors, you got to get a great quarterback, and that quarterback can make everyone look better, right? Maybe Wandale has a much better, next couple of years, or even if they retain him, he has one more year left on his rookie deal. Tyrone Tracy, maybe he looks a lot better because you can open up the running game. How do you build this offense and structure it to fit a rookie quarterback and maximize that first season?
Well, I want to make a point on Wandale, because you mentioned him a couple times there. I think he is so poorly utilized and mismanaged in this Giants offense. He only gets the ball 3 yards away from the line of scrimmage, or at the line of scrimmage. And this is the point that I want to highlight, Alex. Yesterday, we had a player step in and play quarterback for the Giants. He had never taken first-team reps with the Giants. So he doesn't have any set preconceived notion of, Wandale's my check down option. This guy's this guy's that. Wandale got a 25-plus yard target yesterday and snagged that thing from Tim Boyle. He stepped in and was like, I don't care if it's Wandale and he's our check down option. I'm just going to throw this thing to him deep. I thought that was, why doesn't that happen? Yep. Why doesn't he get any targets?
You want to know why?
And it also happened last year, Alex. Wandale didn't have any receptions past the 10-yard line, right? Past the first down marker. But then when Tommy DeVito stepped in on that Monday or Sunday night game versus the Packers last year, they threw that flea flicker and he gunned it downfield to Wandale and he made the catch. He's actually made the most of those opportunities. He never receives those opportunities, which is why I'm saying the Giants don't know how to use their players. Yeah. Because Wandale, I get it, he's a small body. He's not somebody you want throwing 50-50 balls to, obviously. Tyreek Hill isn't a big body who you throw 50-50 balls to, and he gets open downfield all the time. I know, different caliber of player, but just because a player is short doesn't mean they can't catch the ball downfield. Wandale never gets the targets, never even runs the routes past the 10-yard stick. So I just don't understand why the Giants don't know how to utilize their players. Every week we see short receivers make plays 15, 20, 50 yards downfield. Wandale's not allowed to run a freaking route deeper than a 12-yard hook? Come on now. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous, but here's kind of why I think that happens sometimes, not just to Wandale, but to other receivers as well, is because these players, Tim Boyle has nothing to prove. Zero to prove, right? Like Drew Lock is trying to find his way into another starting opportunity. Tommy DeVito is trying to find his way onto an NFL roster. Tim Boyle's like, what? I shouldn't even be on an NFL roster. I'm just going to sling the fucking rock and see what happens. You know what I mean? These guys are like, Tim Boyle was the first player that we saw this season that was like, screw it. I'm just going to throw the fucking thing. I'm going to throw it up and let my guys make plays. How many times have we seen the Giants quarterbacks not take risks because they're scared of a mistake?
But here's the thing. It doesn't add up. Something's missing here, and I'm going to try and theorize what I think it is. Last year, Tommy DeVito stepped into the lineup. We made this exact same argument for him. He was throwing it up 50-50 balls. He was playing like he had nothing to lose. He didn't give a shit, and he was making plays because of that, right? Drew Lock, throughout his entire NFL career, has been the F-it ball guy. Just throws it up into coverage and doesn't care. He gets to the Giants, and he won't take these chances and won't take these shots downfield. Tommy DeVito this season, now that he's been coached for a while under the Giants, won't take these shots downfield, isn't seeing these open guys, isn't taking those F-it balls. Tim Boyle hasn't practiced with the Giants at all, steps into the lineup, and takes these F-it balls and throws it downfield. So, add all that up, Alex, and this is the picture that I'm trying to paint. Last year, Tommy DeVito, unproven, F-it balls. Drew Lock throughout his career, F-it balls. This year, Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock coached under Brian Daboll all year long. No more F-it balls. Tim Boyle steps in without the Daboll coaching. F-it balls. Is it a Brian Daboll problem? Is he coaching the quarterbacks to play this conservatively? Because that's what I'm starting to get at now. That's how I'm starting to feel about it. It's not a coincidence to me that you had an undrafted rookie free agent last year in Tommy DeVito throw like he had nothing to lose. This year, he gets his opportunity. He's playing scared. He looks like a copy of Daniel Jones. Won't throw the ball downfield. Drew Lock, same thing. Won't throw the ball downfield. Looks like a copy of what we had with Daniel Jones. Where is the aggression going? And why is it that when these players get coached for 8+ weeks by Brian Daboll, they stop throwing the ball downfield? Because that's what it's starting to look like to me. Tim Boyle steps in. F it, let's throw it downfield. Off my back foot. 3 guys in my face. Touchdown to Malik Neighbors. Why can't anyone else do that? Are they not allowed? What is Brian Daboll coaching them? What is he saying? Is it a Shea Tierney thing? What is happening to the aggression of these quarterbacks who step in? I mean, Drew Lock was known to be way too aggressive. I feel like he barely took any shots downfield. Is it a coaching thing? That's what I'm starting to feel like it is. I feel like Brian Daboll is telling them, you have to play conservative, no chances downfield, keep the ball clean. And meanwhile, you and I are sitting here, Alex, like, holy shit. Throw some interceptions if it means you're actually going to throw the ball downfield. We don't care. At least take some chances. Tim Boyle seemed to get that memo. The rest of the guys that are being coached by Brian Daboll all year long doesn't seem like they know how to throw the ball 10 yards downfield.
And I'll give you a really good example of what happens when you have a quarterback that's willing to do that and an offensive coordinator that's promoting that. You get a Jameis Winston and the Browns, who like sometimes luck into wins, right? They've won a couple of really weird like games against good teams because of Jameis Winston's ability to say, screw it, I'm going to take a chance. But instead, the Giants are trying to play this like anti-mistake game, and they're like, we don't want to throw any interceptions. It's only going to put us in a worse foot. We don't want to have any turnovers. We're going to play this clean brand of football that doesn't move the ball at all and punts it right back anyway. And it's like they're just trying to eliminate mistakes to not hurt themselves, but they get blown out anyway. And it's like, you need somebody who's going to take risks. But at the same time, I think the quarterbacks that are in this game, is it a Brian Daboll problem? Maybe. But I also think these quarterbacks are, look, this is personally how I think. I look at it, Anthony. I don't think Tommy DeVito ever for a second thought that he was going to be starting over Drew Lock when the opportunity came. I think that he was completely blindsided, and I don't think he had any chemistry with this offense when he went into it, because they changed the entire playbook. We heard from multiple reporters that the third string quarterback on the Giants was not getting reps with the starters, not a single rep. So he went from being the third stringer to not playing with the first stringers to them starting in 1 week. Like, he did not know how to manage that offense. So like, for right off the bat, like, I think that promotes actually being more aggressive personally, because I think like if you don't know shit, might as well just take shots. But DeVito played this like really conservative style that did not blend itself to his style, and he tried to like adjust, and it was just so bad. And then at the same time, you also look at Drew Lock, who then like they like leapfrogged, and then they went back to him, and Drew Lock's like, at this point, you just passed me over. Now I'm the starter. Now I'm like running for my life because the offensive line was horrible against Dallas, and he's getting hit, he's getting hurt, he's getting bruised and battered. He's not taking risks because he can't see. Like he was so rattled mentally that like you could see he was not focused. You could tell Drew Lock wasn't focused. He was pissed off, frustrated. He was obviously not in his own game, and like this is just how Look, I think Joe Shane did a tremendously horrible job, like almost historically horrible job piecing together this quarterback room. Like one of the worst quarterback rooms I've ever seen in an NFL team. One of the worst. And let's not beat around the bush. This was one of the worst quarterback rooms in my life that I've seen. In my life. He should be fired for that in of itself, right? But aside from the point, I mean, we clamored about potentially going out and getting Justin Fields as a backup. We would have won a couple of games more if we had Justin Fields over freaking Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito. I have no doubt about that. But then you look at the situation, that he's put together, and it's like, okay, not only are the quarterbacks bad, but the offensive scheme is bad. The players are not running proper routes. There's no rub routes. There's nothing to promote a genuinely effective offense that we see other teams do. The NFL is a copycat league. Why are you not stealing some of these rub routes, easy throwing concepts from the Rams? Yeah. Why are you not stealing some of these concepts from other teams that are working? Instead, Brian Daboll's coaching like he's never freaking coached before, and it's like the play calling is horrible. Like you take over play calling just for it to get worse, and now people are clamoring to keep you. I don't understand this logic here, in my opinion.
Well, I'll add on to that as well and say, at the beginning of the episode, you were kind of discussing Malik Nabers and how they made it a focal point to get him involved this week, and, they ran the offense through him, and they did. But they didn't do that the past 4 weeks, right? I've been on this show every week, like, why can't Malik Nabers get a screen pass just to make sure he touches the ball in the first half? Like, he had 2 games back-to-back where he didn't touch the ball in the first half. Finally, the point's gotten around. Someone must have listened to Fireside Giants, I think, in the Giants building, because this past Sunday, he goes the first drive without touching the ball. Second drive, they immediately call on the screen and get the ball in his hands and then throw him a few other passes. There you go. Good. Now you finally figured that out in week fucking 15. It's not that hard to get the ball into the hands of your best playmaker, and I've been saying that since fucking week 4. I've been saying it all season long. Just throw him a screen and get him into a rhythm. Start getting the ball into his hands. See if he can make something happen. Hey, he does. He makes things happen. So, yeah, while we can give them credit for yesterday feeding Malik Nabers and trying to get him involved, that's been a problem for them all year long. They haven't been building game plans around him and making it a point of emphasis to get him involved early and often. That's been a major problem. So, on top of all of the problems that we have with this team, they're wishy-washy on how well they're able to utilize their best players anyway. So, if you want to say that it's a roster thing and it's a Joe Shane thing, or if it's a coaching thing, it's a Dable thing, it's all of it. Everything is a mess right now. And that's one last point that I want to bring up, Alex. And I brought this up a little bit the other day, but I want to kind of develop this thought further. Giants fans last offseason told us, this team is really bad. No rookie quarterback can find success here. The Giants should take a playmaker and keep building around Daniel Jones. Okay, so the Giants bought into that narrative. They did that. They kept building around Daniel Jones, and look at how it went. But if the argument last offseason, Alex, was that this roster was too bad to plug a rookie quarterback into, what is the argument this offseason for putting a rookie quarterback in this situation that's worse than it was last year? This roster is even worse somehow. And that's the big question that I want to snowball that into, Alex, for you to answer. Maybe you don't have an answer immediately. Maybe you're going to have to think on it. But this roster versus 2021. The roster that Joe Shane inherited versus the 2024 roster that he has reconstructed. Which one would you rather have? Because for me personally, I might lean towards 2021. And that roster was terrible. We called it a gut job. But this 2024 roster, and actually, let me jump out ahead of this. Fans are going to say, well, they signed some pieces. The offensive line looked better early in the season. They do not have a quarterback. This current roster right now does not even have a quarterback under contract in 2025. In 2021, they had some young ascending pieces that they were able to lock into long-term contracts, like Dexter Lawrence, like Andrew Thomas. Who are the young ascending pieces on this team that are due for extension that you actually want to hand money to? It's not Kayvon Thibodeau. It's not Evan Neal. Who do you want to hand money to? This roster does not have the upward trajectory that the 2021 roster had, in my opinion. Ultimately, I think that I would rather take that one. That one actually had some established stars, too. Saquon Barkley was on the team. We've got a rising star in Nabers. We don't really have that many established stars. Andrew Thomas is one thing. He's injury-prone. Dexter Lawrence is another thing. He's on IR. He's not injury-prone, but he's on IR. Take it all, put it in a vacuum. I think you might have an argument for picking the 2021 roster over the 2024 roster, and that says a lot about Joe Shane.
I mean, the easiest argument is just look what the players that were on the roster in 2021, look what they're doing now. The Giants are down the offensive player of the year this year in Saquon Barkley, or candidate of the year. One of the candidates, a couple really. I mean, Josh Allen probably wins that one. But I guess for the AFC. But the NFC, Saquon Barkley, he's up there, man. I mean, they lost one of the most productive running backs. Obviously, he's better on the Eagles because of their situation compared to the Giants, but Saquon Barkley is better. Evan Ingram's a really, really good tight end in the NFL now, like very, very solid tight end. I'd say he got better when he left the Giants. I argue that's probably fair. You could argue that Sterling Shepard still has juice left in the tank, despite the fact the Giants cut him. I think he would have been a fine. Why not, again, another leader in the locker room that people respected, he got have brought back from veteran minimum. The Giants decided to let go for what? For nothing? So another ridiculously dumb decision. Dexter Lawrence, obviously you still have, but he was like ascending at that time. Leonard Williams is having a ridiculously good year for the Seattle Seahawks.
Julian Love.
Xavier McKinney, he's one of the best defensive players in the NFL this season. Julian Love, you mentioned it. Even Lorenzo Carter went on to being a starter for the Cardinals for a bit. James Bradbury went on to be a pretty good player for the Eagles last couple years, but he was one of our best players back then. You could argue, I mean, like you're saying, the starting players on that team were better than what the Giants have now. The offensive line, I mean, it's Matt Skura, Billy Price. You know what? Another really good one is Will Hernandez. He went on to have a really good career with the Cardinals.
John Feliciano had a good season last
John
year.
Feliciano, he went to a Super Bowl.
BJ Hill is a legitimate starter for the Bengals.
BJ Hill.
He was always good with the Giants. I don't know why they let him go. I wasn't happy about that when it happened.
Yeah, I know. I mean, who else? I'm like trying to scour this. Nick Gates went on to having a pretty solid future with the Commanders. I don't think he's doing much anymore. But aside from those guys, I mean, Dory Jackson was still in his prime then. They had, I mean, Shane Lemieux, oh, God, he was horrible. I forgot some of these names. Blake Martinez was on that team. He was a really good linebacker for us for a year or two. Jabril Peppers, he's been excellent for the Patriots when healthy. Another guy they let go for nothing. So, this is you look back at it in hindsight, and it's like, well, damn. Like, there were players on that team, and, I'm not saying it was a better team because they both were horrible. Both rosters were disgustingly bad. I mean, you look at the depth on that 21 team, and it's equally as bad as the depth now. But the Giants have arguably gotten worse, right? They've arguably gotten worse in that 3-year span. And I know the Giants kind of tried to skip over a rebuild, and now people are saying, well, now's when the rebuild starts. I'm like, dude, what? Why does the rebuild start now? I know a quarterback can change everything, but that doesn't eliminate the needs on the rest of the roster. The Giants had 3 years, and they built. This is Joe Shane's roster, guys. The whole roster's been gutted. This is Joe Shane's roster, and he has put together one of the worst rosters in the sport. Guys. And I know that like half the defense is injured and all these things, but you want to know what incompetency leads to? Injuries. We've talked about it for years. Incompetency, poor coaching, poor fundamentals leads to injuries. And that is what the Giants are now seeing. More injuries because of incompetence.
Yeah, I actually thought there was the perfect example of that yesterday on display for the Giants, Alex. You're right. We've said that for like 2 years now. We came to the conclusion after a couple of years of this. Good football teams are healthy because they're good football teams. Bad football teams are not bad football teams because they're hurt. They're hurt football teams because they're bad football teams. Bad play results in injuries. Prime example yesterday, Chris Manhertz gets blocked to shit. Somebody rushes through him. He starts getting into a fight. Cleats Malik Neighbors. he cleated his own teammate because he was getting beat at the line of scrimmage.
I can list multiple. I mean,
Billy Price snapping the shit out of Nick Gates' leg.
I was going to say, Nick Gates literally snapped his leg in half because Billy Price was incompetent.
Yes.
That's literally why he got hurt. You know what I mean? Like, we've seen this. How about Andrew Thomas? Because they blocked a field goal, and he was running down after a DB, and that's what started his injury-prone streak. Right, he missed a whole year with that hamstring injury.
Dexter Lawrence,
and hamstrings are important, man.
Hurt because he has to do so much for a team that can't stop the run without him on the field.
Yep, he has nobody. Exactly. I mean, how about Brian Burns continuously getting injured because they literally have nobody else providing a pass rush.
Andrew Thomas playing through that injury, making it worse because he knows that there's nobody else decent enough to go into the lineup for him. They don't have any proper depth to fill in for him. There's so many examples.
So many examples. Incompetency leads to injury, and the Giants are bewildering levels of incompetence. So, this is where we are. So an offense that is going to usher in a new rookie quarterback. Let's be quite honest with each other. We all want a quarterback. Anthony, you want a quarterback? Alex, I want a quarterback. But you know what? You want to know something, Anthony? Is that if the Giants are bad next year, and just because you draft a quarterback does not mean you're going to be good. In fact, it means you're starting the trend of hopefully getting to being good. If they are a horrible football team that's still incompetent and you destroy the young confidence of that player, Joe Shane and Brian Daboll are going to get fired anyway. right? I think you clean house now and let that new regime pick that quarterback because at least you have a chance to bring in somebody who can implement a better culture, foster an environment where a young quarterback can thrive. The Giants are fostering an environment. It's almost like if you have a nest and like the nest is put together with straw and poor material and it's easily falling out of the tree, it's easily malleable, and the Giants need to be putting together a nest that is made of iron, like made of freaking hard tough materials, because it won't fall out of the tree, and then all the little animals and birds can can foster a good healthy upbringing. And this is what we need to do for a young quarterback, because if you try to situate a young quarterback in a shitty nest, it's going to fall and die. You know what I mean? Like, that is what is going to happen. I'm just using birds as an example because that's what popped into my head. But that quarterback is going to fall and die. And that is what is going to happen. You need to have a strong foundation. The Giants have a weak foundation, a poor culture of development of prospects. They need to bring in somebody who has a history of developing players, a history of developing a culture, somebody with a little bit of experience, and maybe a good young OC to build an offense. Like, I know people hate Mike Vrabel and they don't like him, but at least he'd bring you some sense of culture. He'd be better than Brian Dable, that's what I think. And you bring in a young OC who's going to foster an environment where a young player can thrive, a young quarterback can be in a modern offense, and that OC is his job is to build that offense and run that scheme and call those plays, and your head coach can just do their damn job and not have to do 100 things at once. I think that's a fine alternative to what we're seeing right now.
Sure, but the problem then becomes, who are these people to do these things, and do they want to be here? Because if I were a GM
right,
and I had multiple job opportunities and the Giants were one of them, they certainly wouldn't be number one to develop and further develop my career. That's for sure.
Well, they're certainly not getting anybody. I mean, dude, if the Giants fire Mike Kafka, they're gonna let him go. I think his contract expires. They're gonna let Mike Kafka go. I'll argue this, and I think this is the argument you got to make, Anthony. You are more likely to get a young OC, a young, decent, good, uprising OC, to take over that job with a new regime in place than you are to convince them to join Brian Dable's offense, right? I think you're better off, because there's two ways. Like, you're going to struggle to get a good OC no matter what, if you are Brian Dable or a new regime. But at least a new regime says, we're starting from the ground up. We are building something special. We're going to rebuild this great organization into something competent. If you're Brian Dable and you're trying to go get a good OC, and that OC is like, you guys are freaking horrible. Your coaches hate you. Your players don't respect you. Why on earth would I sign up to be a loser? That's what I would. That's my perspective. You know what I mean? Like, a new regime at least gets to start from ground one. Brian Dable starting from the freaking basement, trying to crawl out to average. So it's like, that's my perspective. Like, it's not apple. It's apples to oranges, man. It's not apples to apples here.
Your perspective has credence because this last offseason we saw the Giants hire, I think, their 4th or 5th choice defensive coordinator in Shane Bowen. They interviewed so many guys, and then eventually they settled on Shane Bowen because all these other guys took the jobs that they actually preferred over the Giants' job. So there's plenty to support the argument that you're making. And I think that, listen, I mean, we're going to just repeat points here at this point. Like, we're on the same page with this. This Giants offense, I mean, who would want to be coach? Who would want to coach under Brian Dable right now? Like, with the offense regressing every single year, sure, he was considered at one point this offensive mastermind. Mm-hmm. They're averaging less than 15 points per freaking game right now.
I know people will say, like, oh, like, they have multiple quarterbacks, QB4s, and blah, blah, blah. But Daniel Jones wasn't averaging much more than that. So it's right. Like, it's a moot argument. That when their offensive line was good and Daniel Jones was healthy, they were averaging like 16 or 17 points a game, still bottom of the barrel in the NFL.
I also think that there's a point to make here. Sometimes we say nobody's going to want to coach this team, nobody's going to want to be the GM here, and then we'll see fans say, guys, you're ridiculous. This is still the New York Football Giants. I think
we've lost that, man.
I think, yeah, we've lost that, and it's important to put in perspective that kind of historical, storied ball club. Heard that all offseason for the Yankees too. Soto went to the Mets.
I mean, it's a lot different because, and dude, you hear that for the Yankees, and they made it to the World Series last year,
yes.
and they still lost Juan Soto because of the guy that wanted to pay more.
But Giants, the history of the Giants franchise is enough to attract a star in free agency or a star.
I'd also like to point out that the NFL is a "What have you done for me lately" league. You know what I mean? Like, it's "What have you done for me lately." These guys sometimes have one chance to get up to being a head coach or being an offensive coordinator and succeed. They have one chance, most of these guys. I mean, Joe Judge is in freaking college. Pat Shermer's in college football. These guys are not even in the NFL anymore. So let me just point out that if you're the Giants and you have a recent history, last decade, of churning through head coaches, churning through defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators, churning through general managers, you are setting another team that wants to come here another player or another candidate for a head coaching job or any other personnel job is going to be like, this is going to be a failing situation if I'm joining the current regime. If it's a brand new slate, you have a better chance of getting someone you actually want, because at the very least, you're not inheriting the failures of the previous regime, right? I mean, yes, you're inheriting the roster, but at least you can start to rebuild the foundation the way that you see it. And I'm of the opinion, Anthony, and people say, well, we shouldn't be switching over, GMs and head coaches. We shouldn't be churning through. We have to give them time. I'm of the opinion that you treat your head coaches and GM like quarterbacks. You keep taking shots until you hit on one, because we are watching NFL teams do that right now, and we are seeing teams turn a new leaf in a season. Look at Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury and the Commanders. They went from being in no man's land, and I know the quarterback takes a big part in that, but you know what I'm trying to say is, like, you see teams are firing quick, hiring quick and firing faster, because you can do that until you find the right people. You cannot keep committing to incompetence.
I agree with you to an extent here. So I say it all the time on the show: you hire slowly, you fire quickly, right? And I think that the Giants should fire Dable, but I don't think that I necessarily agree with the as many darts at the board and, with the head coaches. I don't think it's the same as a quarterback, because I will argue Dan Campbell was a 3-win team in his rookie season with the Giants. This is where I'm going to say that I agree with you, but okay, the head coach can't get worse every single year. I like patience with a head coach. The first season, if you only win 3 games, that's fine. That's understandable. The second season, you got to win more than 3 games. Okay, now you won 6. Yeah. All right, now the next year, let's win 9. Right? Let's keep adding to that total. The Giants went from 9 to 6 to 2/3.
3.
That's the opposite trend and direction. That's where you need to start talking about a firing. So I agree with you, like, in the sense where
not one after one. I'm not talking about firing like one year. I'm
and talking that's why I'm saying I'm a proponent. It's been 3 years. It's not there. Fire him.
It's time.
Don't give him a
It's enough time to know.
Fire.
It's enough time.
It's enough time to know. Once you've got a sample size, you judge based on that sample size. So yes, I agree. Fire quickly, and this is the time to fire. But I also think if the coach shows promise and then develops after a few years, keep them. The problem is the Giants keep hiring coaches. They look okay, maybe they're fine. They regress the next year in, and that's when you know that it's time to fire them. I don't think that John Mayer's had bad practice in firing these head coaches that he's fired. I think his problem has been that he's kept GMs that he should have fired. Dave Gettleman was here for way too fucking long. If he keeps Joe Schoen, he's going to be here for too long. Why is Joe Schoen worthy of a 4th year and Dable's not? They're both incompetent. They both have done horrible things to set this franchise back. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know who the Giants are going to hire. I don't know who's going to want to coach here, but I just want to see a progression year to year, not a regression, because when you're talking about, all right, we're rebuilding in 2022, and by the time you get to 2025, your roster is half as good as you were in 22, that shows you everything that you need to know and tells you how bad this team is being ran. So, yeah, like I said, I disagree with you slightly, but I also agree with you. We're kind of...
Yeah, it's just gotten to the point where, if you're going to draft a young quarterback, you need to have an environment that breeds development, and this regime has not proven to do that, and you need to bring in people who can help do that. Otherwise, they're going to end up firing them anyway. I mean, the Commanders paired the hiring of Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury with the new quarterback, right? I think that's a fine methodology. You know what I mean? I think that's a fine method. And here's the thing. And you want to know the real problem, Anthony, with the Giants, is that the 3 years that Brian Dable and Joe Schoen have been here, they've never drafted a quarterback. You know what I mean? They've never, despite the fact that a team that desperately needed more competition at quarterback, just competition, they never drafted one. They had 3 draft years. They had, 40, 50 picks at their disposal and never took a quarterback, even in the mid-rounds with someone who had some inkling of potential? Never? Nobody? If Brian Dable is some guru that can develop quarterbacks, why did they never entrust him with a player that was worth a third or fourth round grade? Instead, they went with the undrafted route in Tommy DeVito, who clearly was never going to have a chance. You know what I mean? Like, this is what incompetency looks like. You bring a guy in to help develop a quarterback, but the only quarterback you can actually develop is a guy that's a top 3 pick. That's not how it should work all the time. Josh Allen wasn't a top 3 pick. You know what I mean? Like, I do think that this is... And Josh Allen was a unicorn. The guy is a freaking alien. You watch what he's doing right now. That guy doesn't care who the hell is coaching him. He's going to go out there and do whatever he can, whatever he wants. He's gotten better since Dable left. And I think Dable deserves some credit for his development and growth there, but, like, let's be honest. Josh Allen plays like he is in the backyard. And that is there's not many quarterbacks that can replicate that. Rare. So they need to start. Very rare. So he's a unicorn. So I'm done comparing Josh Allen's growth to Brian Dable's skill set. I am done using that as an example because it's a bunch of bullshit.
And the last point that I want to make, because I think this is good food for thought to close on for us to maybe ponder for a future episode or for the viewers to ponder. So we're talking about, this offseason, Joe Schoen, if he's still a GM, has to take a quarterback. The Giants have to take a quarterback, right? But we've also mentioned this idea recently, Alex, where Giants' roster is really bad. Maybe they could benefit from trading down and waiting on taking a quarterback, right? That's been an idea. Or we've also just argued we want a new regime to step in so that they don't have to take a quarterback. They can take a quarterback. They likely will, but it's not a necessity like it would be for Joe Schoen. And here's a point that I want to make. 2 of the best quarterbacks, arguably, in this draft class are going back to school. Garrett Nussmeier from LSU has gone back to school, and Drew Aller from Penn State is going back to school. That was announced today. And here's why I want to highlight that, Alex, because I think it's really important to note. The quarterbacks who spend more time in school over the past few years, those are the guys who are finding more success in the NFL. It's not the one-and-done Joe Burrows. Like, Joe Burrow had one fantastic season, went to the NFL, and he's a superstar. Those are the unicorns. The better players are the ones who actually spend the full 4 years in college, 3 years even as a starter, and then make it to the league. Like a Nussmeier, who we said, a lot of tools and traits, very raw, not sure if he can be an immediate impact player. He'll probably be better served next year. Now he has a chance to be a number 1 pick where he would have been a mid-round pick. Now I'll say the same thing for Drew Aller. Was supposed to be a mid-round pick. He puts in another good year at Penn State. He could be a number 1 pick next year if he continues to develop, hone in his craft, and bring in some of those intangible traits with the tangible traits. And I will argue, Cam Ward is this class's version of that. Last year, he did declare he was supposed to be a mid-round pick. He went back, he developed further. Now he might be a top pick. But those are the guys that I think you need to keep an eye on, those guys who stay for longer. And that's why to throw that out there, should the Giants force it on a quarterback this year that maybe they're not completely convinced about, maybe they're not totally bought into, or should they build out the roster in a rebuild with a new regime and maybe consider take the quarterback when it's the right quarterback at the right time, because this might not be the right quarterback, and it also might not be the right time. 2026 class is now shaping out to look as good, if not better, than the 2024 class was. 2025 class is not going to be that. We know that's already a fact. This class is not as nice pre-draft process as this past class was. This past class was like generational. 2026 class now could be really freaking good. You got Nussmeier with an extra year of developing. You got Aller with an extra year of developing. Sure, maybe Beck turns around. I don't really believe in Beck. He might go back to school. I don't really believe in him.
Who knows?
But Arch could come out next year. He probably won't, but he could. There might be some names to keep an eye on next year. That's all I'm saying. Just food for thought. I'm not making any declarations one way or another, but it's food for thought that the Giants, if they keep Schoen, have to take a quarterback this year. And it might not be the right quarterback at the right time. But if you just wait for the right time and the right QB, that's when you succeed. So there is an argument, I think, for bringing in a new regime and letting them just go whichever way they want.
Yeah. I mean, I'll point this out as Tibosaurus Rex makes his appearance for the first time in weeks. Put that thing away, dude. He helps us win games. We want to lose games. Put that thing away.
You hear that? Chuck the room. I think Tibosaurus might be down for count.
Him and Tibbs are both down for the count. But I'll tell you what, though. You want to know what it tells me that Drew Aller and Garrett Nussmeier have gone back to school? You want to know what it tells me? Pretty obvious. It tells me that they know that what NFL teams are thinking about them. It tells me that they know that they were not going to be drafted very high. So there's people out there, by the way, that think Aller is better than Sanders and better than Cam Ward. You know, there are people out there, maybe not a lot of them, but there's some people out there that believe that. If that's the case, like, what's the difference between Aller and Nussmeier compared to Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. It's a big enough margin that, two of those guys are going to be top 10 picks. But last year, neither Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders are top 10 picks. You could argue neither of them are top 15 picks, right? Like, is J.J. McCarthy, was he a worse prospect than those two guys? You could argue definitely not. You could argue Michael Penix wasn't. By the way, you want to know what Brian Dable said about Michael Penix this morning? He said that he thought Michael Penix was a good prospect who could throw to all three levels of the field. If he believed that Michael Penix was a good quarterback with great translatable traits, why did the Giants not draft him? I mean, of course, he probably could just be bullshitting and trying to save face. But, I'm just trying to get to the point of, like, the Giants had chances to draft quarterbacks. They just decided not to. And that is on their decision-making. And that is on them. Because they decided to stick with a bad quarterback room. They decided to do this. Why people give them this break, I don't really understand. People just ignore it like it's they didn't decide to do these things. They didn't decide to extend Daniels. They didn't decide to pass on quarterbacks in the draft. They didn't decide to let Saquon and McKinney go. They made these choices. Whether we agreed with it or not is irrelevant. They made the choices. They built the roster. They're a failing team. They're a failing organization. Nobody respects them anymore. Like you said before, our defensive coordinator, we lost Wink Martindale. We had to take whatever we could get. We took the most experienced of the shit options available. And Shane Bowen, God, he is horrible at his job too. You know what I mean? He came from the Titans organization, and they fired Shane Bowen. You know what I mean? They fired Shane Bowen. We picked up the scraps because we couldn't get anyone better. So, do I think this defense is bad? It's injured, and they are on the field a lot. There's things that, certainly don't help them, and the roster was horrible. I mean, we begged them to sign a cornerback, and they didn't do that. They went and got a Dory Jackson the last possible second. We knew he was washed already. You know what I mean? Anthony and I literally begged. We're like, this could be the worst secondary in football. The only reason that their stats don't show that is because the Giants let up over 100 rushing yards a game on average. So, teams are just running all over us. They don't need to pass the football. You know what I mean? And you called it out. You actually called it out. And I didn't think it was going to be a big deal, but you called it out really nicely in the preseason that we had a lack of depth at defensive tackle. And that has become a really big problem for us. So, this is a roster that is flawed significantly, but it's also because of the coaching. It's a lack of confidence. The defense doesn't trust the offense. The offense doesn't trust themselves. And a rookie quarterback isn't going to solve that, man. A rookie quarterback is only as good as the coaching around a rookie quarterback, in my opinion.
And I want to throw out there, rookie quarterback doesn't solve that. You're right. And rookies in general make the point of the rookies, because I made this point weeks ago, Alex. The rookies are being asked to play a ridiculous amount of snaps because they're filling in positions that the Giants opened up as needs in free agency. Like Xavier McKinney leaving in free agency. The Giants had to draft Tyler Nubin to step in and play 99% of snaps. Now he's hurt, and they don't even have a competent starting safety back there, right? Now imagine if the Giants actually retained their in-house talent and drafted best player available. They could have Xavier McKinney and a healthy Tyler Nubin. They could have two good safeties on this team right now if they decided, hey, we're going to pay our in-house talent and we're going to continue to take the best player available in the draft. But that's why I keep always mentioning with Joe Shane's strategy. People say, well, he has good process. He takes premium positions early. He lets premium positions go in free agency so that he can fill them in the draft with half as good underdeveloped players. I don't care how much potential Tyler Nubin has. Tyler Nubin, sure, he had a good season, and he had a lot of potential. He was never going to be the same caliber of player as a 4-year starter in Xavier McKinney from year one. They opened up a massive hole in the roster, shoved a rookie into the spotlight, into that hole, and tried to fill it. That's not how you build an NFL team. That's the worst way to build an NFL team. But that's how the Giants have been building for the last 3 years. When you look around the NFL, Alex, you see teams stack roster talent, stack players on top of players. Remember when everybody clowned the Detroit Lions for taking Jahmyr Gibbs when they already had David Montgomery and they had all this other talent? Now look at them. They've got the best running back duo in the NFL. David Montgomery just tore his knee. Now they still have Jahmyr Gibbs, who steps in and is still one of the best running backs in the NFL, so they can continue to make their playoff run. That's how good teams become better teams. You don't let Montgomery go so that you can replace him in the draft. You keep Montgomery and you add Jahmyr Gibbs. That's what the New York Giants could have done. Could have kept McKinney and taken Tyler Nubin, because Nubin at 47 was great value. But instead, Nubin has to play 99% of snaps, ends the season on injured reserve. So it's just a point that I keep making. I made it weeks ago, and I think that it becomes more true by the week. The reliance on drafting for need and letting holes open up on your roster and then plugging them in through the draft, it's not how you build an NFL roster. every way that you want to slice it, every part of the process that you want to look at for Joe Shane, he doesn't have a good process. He's a bad general manager who makes bad mistakes, and he needs to go. So that's where I'm ready to end it, Alex. I think I'm good. Nearly big, beefy episode, damn near 1 hour. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts or thoughts on what I just said, but I'm about square here.
Yeah, I mean, look, we kind of went on a lot longer than I thought, and they're starting to drill above me, so probably a perfect timing. It's straight up just comes down to fostering development, fostering growth, and the Giants have developed a system that fails to develop and foster talent. So you need to consider overhauling that whole thing, which means cleaning house, and it means a new regime and bringing in new faces. The Giants will have a better chance at getting better coaches if they clean slate, because nobody's going to want to come here. They're going to have to fire. They probably have to fire Shane Bowen. If they don't, it's because they know they're not going to get anyone better. That's the truth. And the offensive coordinator, Mike Kafka's going to go. Why would any OC come here knowing that they're not going to be able to call plays? Why would any good OC come here knowing that Brian Daboll's going to take their job the second things go wayward? Why? No good offensive coordinator is going to come here. Nobody. They'll have to promote some assistant from within just to basically be a yes man to Brian Daboll. That is not how a good organization works. If Brian Daboll and Joe Shane retain their jobs, it's because they've somehow managed to convince John Mara that it's in their best interest. If John Mara has any sense of logic, any sense of self, he will understand that this regime is heading to the abyss, and they're going to take a rookie quarterback with them. Right? What happens when they're sucking and Shedeur Sanders looks Brian Daboll in the face and says, "You're calling a shit offense," and it goes public, and we find out about it, because everything the Giants do badly, we find out about at some point. When Jay Glazer drops the report, Shedeur Sanders is getting pissed and Deion's getting involved. You know what I mean? Because it'll happen if the Giants are that bad. Don't you freaking doubt it. And look, I like Sanders as a prospect, but the truth of the matter is, if they lose and they suck and they're dysfunctional, there's going to be a problem, a big one, because Deion's not going to sit by and watch his son get thrown in the gutter. We know that's to be the truth, right? Cam Ward, I love that kid. He is super humble. Not to say Sanders isn't, but Cam Ward, the way he speaks, he's like, "Come get me. I will transform your organization." The Giants should clean house and freaking draft Cam Ward and pair him with a young OC that is ready to develop an offense around him. Maybe even go out and get his buddy Restrepo, who's, that connection's tangible. You can immediately implement that, especially with Wan'Dale in the final year of his contract. You replace that contract with a cheaper one. I do think that right now the Giants have ways to improve, but they need to do everything in their power. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll have too much baggage coming with them. They have so many other things to worry about than a young quarterback and fostering that development. So, in my opinion, you clean slate, you draft a player like Cam Ward, and you build a damn offense around that kid, because that's how you start a rebuild. The Giants tried to skip around it with Daniel Jones, skip around it with other moves, and they completely fell on their face, and they got to pay the price for that, man. I don't make the rules, but you go 3 years into a rebuild, and the worst year is the last year of that 3-year window. You are. How are you alive? How are you surviving? Right? Darius Slayton said today he doesn't see many changes coming. God help us. Darius Slayton's out here predicting the future of the freaking regime that's in place. Our players are saying crazy stuff that they should not be talking about. Draft prospects and future of people's jobs and what they think is going to happen. Like this is some fucking entertainment, this is some rom-com or some bullshit live entertainment thing. That it's like Hard Knocks but in real time that we're seeing through the reporters. What is happening? You know what I mean? Nothing stays in house in this team anymore. Everything's out there for everybody to see, apparently. And meanwhile, we're supposed to be this team. It's an embarrassment, man. It's an embarrassment, and I just don't know what to say. All we want is for this team to be good. All we want is for this team to be successful, and every single time they have a chance to make a right decision, they make the wrong one. Not that we have been right every single time, because we certainly have it, Anthony, but they're the ones getting paid millions of dollars to make the right decisions, and almost every single time they have the big chance to make a good decision, they make the one that catastrophically fails. And they're being paid millions to do it. And to me, that's a fireable offense. And shoot me, man. If you disagree with that, I don't know what to say. You just love incompetency if that's the case. So, I want to take another shot at a clean slate, pair it with a rookie quarterback, build a competent offense, foster development, a culture of development and respect, implement a good culture. And if we keep things the same, we already know this culture is cooked. The players don't give a shit about them. Players don't give a shit about the coaches. Players don't give a shit about any of the respect of Brian Dable or Joe Schoen because they've made it pretty damn clear, in my opinion.
And we've seen numerous reports that they don't like Joe Schoen and that they don't have a warm feeling towards the front office. So, just in general, I mean, nobody likes anybody in this building is what it seems like. The Giants are just a mess from top to bottom. But I'm done talking about this mess for now, and we'll be back at it tomorrow, I'm sure, to talk more about the great big blue mess that is the New York Giants. But for now, I think that about covers it. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, comment your thoughts down below, leave us 5 stars on Apple or Spotify if you're listening over there, and make sure you follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. And without further ado, catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.